This is episode 43 with Kyle Louw.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 43. And you can probably hear I'm really excited to be bringing you today's guest. His name is Kyle Louw, and Kyle is a spoken word poet and one of my favorite guys on the planet. Now, we first met when Kyle was a speaker and performer at TEDx Cape Town, and I was on the organizing team. But Kyle's story is really, really cool. After browsing the web and coming across an inspiring video while at work at his corporate job, Kyle decided to give slam poetry a try. Little did he know he'd actually entered a local competition. And fast forward to today, and Kyle's now a full-time poet, competing internationally and even teaching others around the world. When I initially reached out to Kyle to do an interview, I thought it would be cool to have him perform a unique poem for us, which he did, and you've got to check it out. It's really cool. But I had no idea that this would turn into one of my favorite interviews thus far. Kyle and I got pumped up about a lot of topics that we're both really passionate about, such as just getting started, comparing ourselves to others, and the power of self-belief. Now, there was some background noise on Kyle's end in this interview, but I urge you to carry on and listen right to the end because he dropped some major goodness which you're not going to want to miss out on. Now, in this episode, you're going to learn how Kyle stumbled into poetry, how to take a more creative path in life, the myth of overnight success and what it really takes to achieve results, why the language and words that we use every day matter a lot, how to upgrade your self-talk, and 18 things to remember for quarter lifers. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in the show at briantier.com/043. And for now, let's go hang out with Kyle. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm really excited to be speaking to a friend of mine and awesome human being, Kyle Louw. Kyle, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Brian. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited, dude.
Yeah, and as you can hear, it's another South African guest, which I'm really excited about. And Kyle and I first met when I was a member of the TEDx Cape Town organizing team. And he was one of the speakers. So really cool work, or I kind of want to say art, not really work, that you've got going on. But for people listening that don't know who you are and what it is you're about, why don't you talk us through that and a bit about your quarter life story?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kyle, first and foremost, and I am a professional poet, a spoken word artist. For people who don't really know what that is, it's kind of taking poetry from the page and putting it on the stage. So it incorporates a lot of like theater, a lot of performance, and it's something I just kind of stumbled across. My story is a bit of a weird one in the fact that I was in a very long-term relationship and decided to move into Cape Town and sold all my stuff to get into this place. Went into a job I really wasn't for or really wasn't enjoying, but knew that it's something I had to do just to be able to pay rent, one of those stories. And I happened to actually find, as I was scrolling through Facebook diligently during office hours, I happened to find a spoken word video. And it was just one of those moments where I just watched this video and it just hit me. It was just like, it was just a smack in the face, but like a really warm smack. And it was like, this is something I have to try. And since I've seen that video, I just never looked back. I just found the first little area where I could perform. And I've been going ever since then. And that was in 2012, I think.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that recent. I suppose for people listening, like the most widely recognized example is maybe someone like Prince EA. Who's I know you dig his work and I do too. So do you remember what that video was?
Yeah, it was a Silly Breaks video. So Silly Breaks is a spoken word artists from the UK. Also like a huge following, also in that like kind of Prince EA, Sarah K kind of level, like a huge digital presence. And I remember the poem was, I will not let exam results define my fate. And it was basically him just chatting about like, listen, I know a lot like about this podcast, a lot about the things that you speak with your guests and stuff. Also, just like, I know you're feeling really challenged and like things are tough, but also like it doesn't have to be. You have Facebook, you have Twitter, you have all these things. You can create blogs, you can do podcasts, you can do it. And it was just this really poetic kind of delivery and this really poetic thing that I watched, and I just fell in love. So it was a Silly Breaks video.
Yeah, we'll have to link that in the show notes.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So what was the job that you were doing that you really weren't digging? And then how did you get started in the poetry stuff?
See, so I'm a huge believer in coincidence. And it was, I found the job through a friend. And I was performance testing. So it was basically a specialized version of IT, right? But my job didn't entail much other than basically coding and waiting for the codes to finish, right? But it was really not something I enjoyed. But when I found the video, everything happened so quickly. It really happened so quickly. I found the video. I'd literally finished watching the video. I then went on Facebook, posted, and asked, does anyone know of any kind of areas where I could perform? Someone inboxed me, and there was a place in Stellenbosch, and their next performance was in 2 weeks. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? I really want to do this thing, but now it's like really real. So then I was faced with like, oh, cool. I had the inspiration and the goosebumps and cool, I'm really good to do it. And then when she messaged me, it was a case of like, oh, this is actually real. Now I need to really sit down and like put my money where my mouth is. So I wrote 3 poems and just went in. It was crazy though, but because just before that, I went to a neuro-linguistic programming course, which is something that I'm also a huge fan of, considering the linguistics and the language of the poetry.
Yeah.
And that course finished the exact same day the slam. It was literally like the course finished at 4:00 in Cape Town, and I drove to the event at 6:00 in Stellenbosch.
No way.
Yeah, it was crazy. And that really, it was mad because that course also really kind of like unpacked a lot of things for me and really kind of helped me along the journey. So by the time I walked into the slam area, I don't know, it was just like it all had worked out, and I just felt really good and really confident and really enjoyed it. And what I didn't know is it wasn't so much an open mic; it was actually a slam competition that I signed up for. So it was like 20. So it was 20 other poets. It was like 350 people, and I was just like, I just wanted to come here and just start and just have some fun and drop some poems and like have like a nice little chilled area. But no, it was a full-on competition, and it was nice. I remember the first time performing and how extremely nervous I was, and how I just wanted to speed and rush through everything and kind of get through it. But from there, it's been an amazing experience.
Yeah. And something that jumped out and really stood out for me there was like, you found this video and you had no background or experience in poetry at all. And suddenly you're like messaging people saying, where can I dive in? And signing up for, well, what you thought was an open mic and ended up being a competition. Like how, I don't know if there's a way that we can translate that into a lesson for people wanting to pursue a more creative path. Like, is it a case of like just get started or take that first step, or like kind of jump and the net will appear type of thing? Or
I feel like I do feel like, especially for poetry, I'm also a firm believer in like, in order to be a good poet, you just have to be a good person. People think that like they have this idea, right? So they have this idea of what is good or what is bad, especially in a poetry format. So a lot of people won't even start because they're just like, oh, I'm not a poet, and that can trickle down into a lot of things. A lot of people just won't even start because they have this like comparison of what to be, whether that's from something they've seen or something they've heard or something they've just experienced. They have this ideal of what is good, right? And then they compare themselves to the bad version of that, right? But for me, I believe if you take pull that out of the scenario entirely, especially when you start, right? Especially when you're starting, if you pull out the scenario of like, oh, I see this as perfect, and I'm not like this, therefore I can't be or do this. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and was there something else you wanted to add there?
No, that's it.
Yeah, and like it's not just poetry. I know with a lot of the stuff I'm doing, like the online stuff, it's out there. Once you hit publish, it's out there for everyone in the world, if they happen to find it, to see. And then it becomes like kind of an identity thing. Like if this isn't good, or if people don't like it, then I'm not good. And
it's a combination. Sorry to interrupt, but it's like a combination of also then living in a space where it's like everything is now. And I know that sounds super cliche, but like people see overnight success all the time, but they don't understand that like overnight success is like 7 to 10 years in some cases. I've been doing a lot of research with a lot of like YouTube sensations, for example, and one of the ones that I really enjoy is Dude Perfect. And these guys are just like, all they do is just trick shots, right? And they just do this most immense and insane trick shots. And I watched their first video ever, which was about 7 years ago, and it was literally like a really shitty editing, like in their backyard. Like it was like really dark, you couldn't really see anything, and they were just making basketball shots, right? And they were just like having fun and messing around. And now they're this world sensation with like close to 40 million views per video. And it was also a beginning of like, listen, we're just gonna have fun and we're just going to try this thing out. So it's that combination of people comparing the good and then also wanting it so quickly. Like, I must have this now. Otherwise, I don't want to, it's like, I don't want to actually put the work in. I just want this to appear. Yeah. And then I want to be famous, or I want to, be well recognized, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, dude, you're speaking my language. Like, I often tell people like my main goal with this podcast, people ask me like, what are your numbers and how many subscribers and like, how are you monetizing? And I just say like, my main goal is just to stay consistent and to keep putting out a new episode every single Monday. And that's what I've done for the last, like, 43 weeks. And it's like,
exactly.
If I go back and listen to my first episode, it's terrible. Like, I didn't have my mic. It's my laptop audio on my old laptop, not even my MacBook that I have now. Like my old laptop, it echoes. It's terrible. But, if I never did that, I had to start. There had to be a number one somewhere.
Exactly.
And if I hadn't done that, we wouldn't be where we are now. And like, the download numbers that I have now. And that's not to brag. It's just to say like stuff has to start somewhere. And
the consistency.
There's a really cool website called, I'm getting really worked up. You could probably
go.
There's a really cool website called the Wayback Machine. And I think it's like archive.org. I'll put it in the show notes. And what you can do is put any URL into this Wayback Machine, and it shows you what the website looked like at points in the past. Like it's got screenshots of what it looked like at various points in the past. And you can go to like the most popular websites you can think of and see when they started. And they like really horrible.
I know people like, I'm such a firm believer in people need to, and that's something I've been doing a lot lately, is like becoming more aware of that and becoming more aware of like not all the bells and whistles and not all the shiny things that you see, you know what I mean? More of the behind the scenes of how people struggled and how it was like at one point they just wanted to give up, and how, you know what I mean? And how these websites looked shit when they first started, and people were like, what is this nonsense? But there's so much power and testament in that, because that becomes far more relatable on a human level than what we see now, as in terms of like this overnight success or the so-called finished product. Like, it's very hard for me personally to relate to a finished product. It's so much easier for me to relate to like, oh wow, that actually looks shit, but they decided they would continue doing it anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Kyle and I are going to get off our soapbox now. let my heart rate return to normal. But yeah, man. So I think for people listening, like, just start. It doesn't matter what it is or what it looks like. Just start.
Exactly.
I'm curious to hear then, if you only started 4 years ago, what did friends and family have to say when, you're coming from basically IT and you now say you want to become a poet?
Yeah. I'm very blessed in terms of, especially on a family level. my mom is super supportive. She's almost at every single show. She's just a firm believer in like, I just want you to do what makes you happy, kind of thing. But I've hit roads where people ask like, oh, so what do you do for a living? And like, I'm a poet. And then they say, oh, but what do you do for a living? And you're just kind of like, well, that's what I do. And then you have those same questions of like, oh, but how do you like pay rent and how do you live and how do you do things like that? And sometimes it's hard. Almost it becomes to a point where I've spent a year on a friend's couch. I've done all those things, but it's a certain level of stubbornness where I refuse to want to do anything else. Right? It's like this is what I'm aimed towards to do, and this is what I feel I am like blessed to do. Having said that, I do, however, feel that as long as I'm writing, I'm happy. So I tend to do a lot of freelance and I tend to do a lot of things like that. But when I'm having a conversation with someone who's a bit on the negative side or a bit on the non-believer side, I always just return it with asking them what they do and figuring out whether it really makes them happy.
Yeah.
And then you have a far more deeper conversation around the actual happiness of work and not around the end product.
Yeah, because when people say like, what do you do for a living? It's like they want to know how you make money and not how you like how are you staying happy. It's kind of backwards.
It is. It's so like we could go for hours talking about like the everyday, what do you do for the living, the everyday, how are you, I'm fine, and you, like we could go all those just like those automatic responses and automatic programmings that you ask people, where I'm such a firm believer in a far more like it sounds super hippie and super crazy, but I'm wanting a far more deeper connection with a person, right? And I tend to try to do that very quickly. So we'll have the conversation around like, what do you do for a living and all that, but then I'll go straight into the next levels of like what makes them happy, what makes them tick, what they'll be doing in a perfect world. And I prefer having conversations with people on that level because it automatically gets past all this, like all these automatic responses and all these autopilots.
So you don't care what I had for dinner last night?
No, I know. Unless it was lasagna, then we could talk to.
Yeah, and that's something that that I picked up from you, not lasagna, but the fact that you have this deep connection when you speak to someone. It's something that I got from you straight away. And I just also wanted to say thanks for sharing that, you know, the story about sleeping on a friend's couch. And it's just that deep knowing that like you're not going to quit. And I had the same thing this year. I know before we started recording, I was telling you about some decisions I had to make earlier this year that have all kind of worked out very nicely this year. But I told my girlfriend, like, I'm prepared to sleep in my car if I have to. Like that wasn't an issue for me at all. If it meant that I could keep doing what I wanted to be doing and what I want to be doing, I was willing to kind of sleep in my car, which is something I haven't really shared before, but you know.
Right. It's true. It needs like I feel like you have to have a certain level of stubbornness. You have to have a certain level of like, there's a balance to everything, obviously. So you need to find a middle ground. But you do need a certain level of stubbornness because it's it's like in those moments of not giving up that things change, right? It's like there was this a mentor that I do a lot of research on, and he was talking about like the bubble effect, and he was like, always at the final point of bursting the bubble that takes you to the next kind of like evolutionary step, that's when you have the most resistance. It's that final little pop. And it's in those moments that like you really need to keep pushing. And just as we were saying, I've been doing so much research on people's struggles before they're like on people's rags before their riches, so to speak, that I'm a firm believer in wanting to be completely open, right? I don't want to sit on the podcast and tell everyone it's like it's all gold and glory and happiness, and because I have those moments, but then that also doesn't come across as real, right? You want people to see that you also have the same struggle and you also have the same negative times and you also have the same down days, but you still continue to pursue through that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I hope to sort of shed light on in this podcast is sharing people's real stories of like their quarter life crises, and even if it wasn't something you'd call a crisis, just showing like that they're real people, and it's not like
Exactly.
out of the ordinary to do something extraordinary.
Right. Exactly.
So you mentioned like the first time you did a gig, you were wanting to get it done and just wanted it to finish. But what is like doing your normal stuff like compared to the TED talk that you gave? I'm interested to hear in that.
Well, the TED talk was just a dream come true, man. But my type of stuff is a lot more. So first of all, the TED Talk gave me a time limit. So I had to be very conscious around the time, right? So when I usually go on stage, I disregard the time unless it's a sort of a 20-minute or 25-minute set. But when I'm performing the poems, I'm not so conscious around time in a normal feature set. And that's when I have a lot more freedom to do what I can and also be very present when I'm performing. So what that means is like, it changes all the time, right? So the poems and the words will remain the same, but the performances will change all the time because the audience is changing all the time and the venue is changing all the time, and things are just always changing and always adapting. And that's one of the most beautiful things about this art form. It's a very kind of like spoken words, a very kind of give and take, especially on energy level, right? So if the audience give you a lot, then in return, you're able to then give a lot.
Yeah, and I've watched some of your YouTube channels, videos, not channels. And like you said, like even the same poem that you've delivered different times, they're all completely unique, which is really cool.
Yeah.
How important is, I had no idea you'd studied NLP, and it's something that I really want to do as well. But how important is the language and words that we use in everyday life?
So important. You touched on something I could discuss for hours, dude. The language we use is so important, and not so much the outside language, but also the internal language. And I'm a huge fan of like just the internal language. That's the most important, right? Just the things we say that we don't even realize we say, or just the things that kind of slip past us, but the things I really believe just then integrate into how we're feeling, right?
Yeah. Give us some examples of those, like some of those things you may not notice.
So just things like when people say, I always feel this way, or like everyone, those kind of like amalgamations of the entire world, right? Always is a huge one for me, and everyone. When people say like I always feel tired, or I always feel sad, or I'm always stressed, it's like, no, that's impossible. How can you always be something? Mm-hmm. When you were 6 years old, you weren't like that. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's like those are ones. Always are huge for me. And also another one is but. But is a huge one for me as well. When people say like, I know this, but it completely disregards, when you use the word but, you completely disregard the sentence that came before it. And what people don't understand is if you in a conversation like that, whether people are conscious to it or not, when you say a sentence and then you say but and you continue the sentence, that first half of that sentence completely gets erased in that person's frame. All they're hearing is everything you've said after but. So if you take but out of a conversation and you replace it with and, it becomes a lot more constructive because it automatically builds on top of itself all the time.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest, Carl. Like, I was really keen to share your work and your art on this episode, but this is becoming so much more valuable than I'd even imagined it would be. So yeah,
it's all good, dude.
Thanks for these nuggets, man. So how can someone upgrade their inner language then?
It's about, first and foremost, it's really about becoming aware, right? If you're not going to kind of do an NLP course or get kind of aware around that kind of science of it, then it's just to become aware, knowing that like all these, I'm also a huge fan of like all these wives' tales that you hear, right? It's like my knee sore because I'm old, and this sounds crazy, right? But my knee sore because I'm old, let's say as an example, right? But like, didn't your knee ever get sore when you were like 11 years old or 12 years old? I don't know, that sounds completely crazy, but it's those like it's those real little things, and it's becoming aware of the things that you are saying. So when you find yourself talking to yourself in a negative way, just to become aware, that's the first step. To stop it and actually be, no, this is actually not the truth. I'm going to reverse it. And while we were doing workshops overseas, we came across something that a friend of mine taught me with regards to limiting beliefs. And he was such a firm believer in completely like reversing a limiting belief. So what that means is, like, if your limiting belief is, I have a fear of public speaking, he would say something like, I'm so confident in front of the mic, you could put it on the moon and the whole world would listen, right? So he was so adamant around being really creative and about really pushing the positive to a huge level, right? To really over exaggerate it so it sits inside your system. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that sort of negative that negative self-talk is really just a limiting belief. So yeah, I think that's also huge. And it's the same when people, like, if we think of people in their 20s, saying things like, I don't know, I'm always getting sick, or I'm always attracting the wrong type of boyfriend or girlfriend. Like, those are the same sort of things. Like,
it's identical.
If you're constantly saying those things, it's just going to keep happening.
It is, and people can call me crazy for that, and people can call other people crazy for that. But it's a 100% belief inside of me and a passion that's exact. Whatever you say, you create. That's just it's just how it works for me. So when you say those things, it always happens. It's just how it works.
I'm keen to hear. Your work obviously depends on things that you're interacting with and seeing and experiencing. So what inspires you in your work?
It's a lot of human interaction inspires me. So a lot of conversations I have with people will inspire poems, and then it's a lot for me. It's a lot of visual things. So it's difficult to explain, but it's like I'll have these moments, the same as when I watch the Sully Break video. I'll have these moments of like goosebumps or these kind of moments of stillness when I'm seeing something that inspires me to such a level that I will then create or write a poem about it. And the craziest thing is, like, it might not be deliberate. It might only happen about 6 or 7 months later, but somehow that inspiration will somehow drizzle down into something I've created, for sure.
I love it. Kyle, you mentioned when you were overseas and that sort of thing. You recently returned from a tour of India and a World Poetry Slam in the States, where you represented South Africa. What was that whole thing like? And you know, the feelings of being on that stage versus the stage that you started out?
Yeah, that was an immense experience. That was a level of the coincidence and anything being possible, like we were saying, with the bursting of the bubble, because I literally, 10:30 on a Saturday night, I'm sitting in the lounge watching a horror movie of sorts, and I got an email from India, and they were just like, listen, we found your video online, really enjoy your work. Do you want to come to India for 3 months and teach? And I was just like, sorry, what? What just happened? And it was a few emails back and forth. And within like 2 months, I was in India doing an artist residency. And it was such an immense experience. From teaching kids, from teaching high schools, from teaching universities, from getting to see India and travel and meet people and being put into a place. India is the kind of place where you can never get comfortable. It challenges you at every single turn. And I'm the kind of individual who really enjoys that.
Yeah, it's high up on my list too.
Right, so the India is the place to go for that, man. Down to like trying to get onto a train, down to ordering food. At every single turn, there's a challenge. And then going from India to the States for the individual World Poetry Slam was also just a complete eye-opener in terms of, for me, it was a case of I had put this American poetry on such a high scale, obviously because it's all I see on YouTube, and that's like where a lot of it all began and started, the spoken word. But being able to go there and see that it's just as human as everywhere else, and it has the same kind of ups and has the same kind of downs, and it has the same kind of individuals, really did something special for me, because it really gave me an insight into the possibilities of my work and being able to push forward. And what I mean by that is like sitting and watching someone perform and seeing all these greats and seeing all these people just be human on stage gave me a huge boost in terms of like, I can continue working and continue just being vulnerable in that same space.
Yeah, like there's nothing stopping me from doing this.
Exactly.
So what's next for Kyle Louw then?
Right now, I am applying like crazy. Just applying for grants, applying for competitions, applying for more artist residencies. At this point in stage, I also have to complete all the poems for everyone who helped me fund to get overseas. So that's kind of next on the plate. As for that, it's just about I've decided to completely kind of remove outside of YouTube and Instagram, completely kind of unplug from the social world, just to kind of focus more on the writing side of things. I mean, I know you had a guest on, I heard a podcast, I think it was Ashley, who was talking about the comparisons of Facebook and how it can be a dark place. So I've removed out of all those areas just to kind of really focus on the writing and really kind of see what kind of inspires and what kind of comes up next.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear how your work shifts from removing yourself from those platforms. Whether that's in a good way or a bad way. Carl, I think you prepared something for us today.
I did.
Good, because that would have been awkward. So, man, people listening to this, they're probably dying to hear how your work even sounds, and it would be terrible if we had this whole interview without sampling some of Kyle Louw's brilliant work. So, man, the stage is yours.
Perfect. Okay, so these are 18 things to remember for quarter lifers. You might end up doing something you hate, or hate yourself for not following your dreams. You will set goals you never get around to because it's just not the right time, or you just want everything to be perfect. There is never a right time. Everything isn't perfect. You'll make promises you cannot keep. You'll lose friends. You'll try and make new ones, knowing that the word try only justifies your failure, but it's okay to fail. Learn from your mistakes. You'll miss the good old days, but you'll forget that you were a child once. You'll fall in love. You'll fall out of love more. You'll miss old lovers while inside new ones. You'll question everything you thought you knew for that new honeymoon love. When you get divorced, you'll forget who you were. You will lose your way. Look for it at the bottom of bottles. Some days breathing will feel overrated. You'll feel stuck. You'll close your eyes and despise your life. You will close your eyes and despise your life. You will close your eyes and despise your life. But in the morning, the sun will rise. And you will survive.
Man, I love that. I told my girlfriend I'm gonna print that out and put it up in my office here.
Oh, nice.
But Kyle, thank you so much. That was really beautiful.
Thanks, man.
I do want to be mindful of the time, but I've got some rapid fire questions at the end here.
Perfect.
So just the first thing that comes to mind in a sentence or two is perfect. What do you wish you'd been told early in your 20s?
That it would be okay. That what you're feeling right now, it will pass. And also on top of that, I wish I had been told that it's okay to feel like when you're feeling negative, it's okay to feel negative. I wish someone had told me, like, don't try and be happy when you're not feeling happy. It's very important to fully feel whatever you are feeling to successfully kind of work through it and move past it.
What is the greatest opportunity for quarter lifers today?
Oh, the world, man. Definitely, as everyone would say, definitely the internet. The internet is a huge opportunity because you're able to create and be anything. on it, and you're able to find your entire tribe on the internet. So that's definitely one of the best things for quarter lifers.
All right, this next one's a little bit trickier. What? Wait, let me frame it like this.
I already know this question, I think.
Oh, perhaps. What would I need to ask you for this to become the most important thing for young people to listen to, and how would you answer that?
You would need to ask me. This is a bit of a strange one. Mm-hmm. You would need to ask me if I believe in coincidence, and then I would need to respond in that coincidences are really the key to ensuring that you're on the right path. And I would tell quarter lifers to every day when they wake up, especially when they leave the house, become extremely aware of the so-called coincidences around you. There's certain books that believe that, like, if people make eye contact with you randomly and it lingers, like, some books believe that is a sign that they're on the same kind of path as you, and you should really kind of just go chat up, go speak to them and see and pick their brains a little bit. So it gets a bit crazy, but in a nutshell, I would say that people must become really aware of the coincidences around them and start to follow those.
Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey concept?
Yes.
It's kind of like that, those little signs that you're on the right path or that you need to change path.
Exactly. Become aware of those, because those can really be helpful in some points, especially when things are not kind of going well and the universe kind of just throws you a bit of a bone to tell you, like, listen, actually, I've got you. This is going to be fine. Like, just keep pushing.
Yeah. Kyle, I have one more question. Before I get to that, what's the best place for people to go and engage with your work and find out what you've got going on?
Perfect. So they can do YouTube and Instagram. On Instagram, it's 27th Warrior. On YouTube, they can just type in Kyle Louw. But if you just Google Kyle Louw, Louw, all my stuff will come up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll link up all of that in the show notes.
Perfect.
So it'll be easy for people to go and find out what you're all about. I have one more question. Before I get to that, I just want to acknowledge you, Kyle, for coming on the show today and sharing your beautiful art and work, not only with us, but with the world, and for recognizing those coincidences and those signs in your life, and now, doing your teaching residencies and spreading the work and helping others pursue their own path. So I'm really grateful for that. And the final question that I have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
If you don't brush your teeth twice a day, listen, if you don't brush your teeth twice a day, it's very important to brush your teeth at night. And I'm taking a twist of one of the guys you had who was talking about drinking water every day, but only drinking water as a kind of, if you can't do this every day, you can't do anything that will make you great every day. And I feel like brushing the teeth is on that same level, because it's a higher metaphor for, like, doing something even when you're tired and all you want to do is sleep, right? And if you can do that, then you could do anything.
I love it. Kyle Louw, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback. It's been really great hanging out, and yeah, man, it's been an honor having you on.
It's been really fun. Thanks, man.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up this week's episode number 43. And thanks so much again to Kyle Louw for coming on the show. Really is one of my favorite dudes on the planet, and he dropped major wisdom on us. So I really enjoyed that. And of course, the performance as well. If you like this one, please share it around with your friends on social media and shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier to let me know your biggest takeaway. For me, it's got to be what Kyle mentioned about the importance of coincidence and being aware of when things happen which seem like a coincidence but are actually an indication that we're on the right path or that we need to change paths. As always, you can get the links and resources that we mentioned in the show at briantier.com/043. And if you want to get all these episodes as soon as they go live, subscribe at quarterlifecomeback.com. Thanks for joining me again this week, and until next time, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting bryanthere.com.